My name's Jack Ogg and I'm the head gardener here at Yorkgate. I did my training at Yorkgate about 16 years ago, and then I left and worked at Harewood House for about 9 years, and then I was asked to come back to Yorkgate as the senior gardener, and then moved on to the head gardener. Yorkgate Garden is an arts and crafts style garden. It was first bought as a farm in 1951 by the Spencer family, and the Spencers, they bought the garden to keep their horse and a couple of ducks and various other things, and then they quickly decided that they wanted to make a garden, and they created the 14-room arts and crafts style garden that we've got today. So one of the first rooms you get to at Yorkgate is our sand garden, and our sand garden is exactly what it sounds like. It's a garden entirely consisting of sand. It's about 3 to 4 foot of solid sand, and then we plant everything directly into the sand, and it gives a Mediterranean feel, but it also means that some plants that we grow in here that might not normally be completely hardy in Leeds, in rainy grey Leeds, will survive. This is agave ovatifolia, that's the whale tongue agave, and it's completely hardy if it has overhead protection from snow and excess rain. So we build these covers over the top of them, and then in a month or so's time we'll take them off, and then these fantastic big spiky evil agave take centre stage in the sand garden for us for the summer. All plants that like that sharp drainage and full sun we're going to try and experiment with in here. So there's lots of South African plants and interesting bulbs. This one is Muscari azureum, and it's one of my favourite bulbs in here, and it's been really successful. In 1998, the last remaining member of the Spencer family, Sybil, died, and in her will she left Yorkgate to the gardener's charity, Perennial. So they own Yorkgate and currently another 4 gardens around the country. Their tagline is, if you work with flowers, trees, grass or plants and fall on hard times for whatever reason, Perennial is there to help, and they're a fantastic charity. So the first room you get to is the maze garden. This was the original entrance to the garden, and Sybil Spencer would sit here in her wicker chair and welcome people into the garden, and this would be the first room they'd see. It's got possibly my favourite tree in the whole garden, this one here, which is Sequoiadendron giganteum pendulum, and it's a weeping form of the giant sequoias in America. So the normal one obviously is quite an upright pyramidal columnar tree. This is a weeping form, and it does bonkers bendy things with its arms, with its branches. So I really like that tree. It's great. So next we've got the old orchard, and it consists of various different flower beds and a big pond in the centre that Fred, the father of the Spencer family, put in for their 50th wedding anniversary. Our next room is the Pinetum, and the Pinetum was planted as a collection of dwarf and unusual conifers, and as you can see, some of them are not dwarf anymore. So the Spencers were a little bit before their time, I think, in the way of planting conifers as long-lived bedding. So they'd plant them in, and they'd let this ABs get to the size they wanted it, and then when it got too big they'd cut it out and start again. They'd plant something else and plant a different one in its place. And obviously a few of these trees, when Sybil left Yorkgate to Perennial in 1998, never got cut down and never got changed. The brewer's spruce in the centre is another fantastic tree, and technically we should probably cut it down, but it's fantastic, so we're not gonna. Here we've got a really iconic view of York Gate. This is one of the spots that people take pictures the most for us, because it's got three iconically York Gate plants. You've got the espaliered blue cedar along the front here, so it's Cedar Atlantica glauca, and then it's trained and clipped into this espalier form. Behind it you've got the 6 yew sails, and then behind that you've got the espaliered pyracantha on the house wall. And then another favourite plant of mine in the background, the Trachycarpus fortunei, the Chusen fan palm or windmill palm, and it's a great plant. The next room is the Dell, and the Dell is a mix of woodland plants from around the world, basically. So you've got tree ferns from New Zealand, there's trilliums from North America, and primulas from the Himalayas, and Mecanopsis. So there's plants from all over the world that like the same setting, like a woodland setting. At the right time of year, you've just slightly missed it now, but it's our main display of snowdrops in the garden. So we've just had our snowdrop event here at York Gate, and currently we have about 60 or so different varieties of snowdrops, about 4 or 5 different species, and about 60 varieties. So that is our show at this time of year. But it's also really good to come to the garden at this time to see the bones of the garden, the structure, the clipped hedges, and the different topiary shapes that we have in the garden. So it's nice to see it at this time, even if you weren't looking at snowdrops. Our feature York Gate snowdrop is one called S. Arnott, and it's an ovalis type, but it's extra tall. So it's like a normal snowdrop on steroids, and it's not double and it's not fancy in any way, but it's a wonderful snowdrop, and it's definitely one of our favourites. The next room we've got is Sybil's garden, and Sybil's garden is the tropical garden here. We were very lucky that we were donated quite a big collection of tropical plants. Or tropical field plants. There was 11 tree ferns. There was about 4 or 5 different scheffleras, which are the hardy umbrella trees. There was a collection of bananas and a collection of palms. So we were donated this, and we thought, no brainer, we'll turn Sybil's garden into a jungle garden. Next room, it's looking a bit empty at the moment because it's February. It's the herb garden. And again, the herb garden, a bit like the fern border, is like the Ronseal paint. It is what it says on the tin, and we just grow herbs in here, or plants loosely associated with herbs. So obviously your garlics and onions are alliums, so we grow loads of ornamental alliums in here, and sage that you would eat in your as a herb is Salvia officinalis, so we grow loads of different salvias in here as well. So we're using the term herb garden loosely, but it works for in here. It's kind of got a bit of an Italian-esque feel to it, and it ends in a summer house. Apparently the summer house is where the Spencers used to have their evening meals and entertain people when they were coming. You can't blame them really, because it's a nice spot. So this next room is a bit more of a corridor, a bit more of an alley, and it is called the alley. It's basically 2 beech hedges either side, and then to start with, it's a collection of snowdrops. It's one of the only parts of the garden where we've got lots of different kinds of snowdrops mixed together. There's also cyclamen coum, and then there's a big collection of anemone ranunculoides, little yellow flowered anemone that comes up. And then in the summer, it is Erigeron carvinskianus, which is a little coastal daisy that you see all over the place, and it works fantastically well and ends with the wobbly sundial at the end. So we're into the kitchen garden now, and the kitchen garden is a working kitchen garden for us. We have a very busy, very popular cafe on site, which makes fantastic cakes, I might add. We'll never be able to supply the cafe with everything they would ever need, because we'd need to turn over the whole of York Gate into a kitchen garden to supply the cafe with the amount of salad they'd need. But we can do some bits and add some stuff on. So when you get a salad in the cafe, it will have some edible flowers, or some of the lettuce will have come from the kitchen garden. The Spencer family were really good at creating vistas through the garden, something that makes the garden feel a lot bigger than it is are some of the lines of sight and some of the really interesting vistas. One of the favourite ones for me is this view through the potting shed window. So this was Sybil's potting shed, and it's where she did all of her potting on of her succulents and cactus in the next room. And then if you look through that circular window, there's the white fire hydrant down in the Dell, which is the focal point for this particular vista. We are lucky here that we don't have to stick to a very rigid planting plan. So long as the Dell stays woodland plants and say the hot garden stays hot colour plants, we've got quite an open palette on what we use in the garden. So that's really nice for us. The next room in from the kitchen garden and from Sybil's potting shed and the barrow store, it's the Paved Garden. The Paved Garden's got a bit of a split personality. So there's two big gravel beds that we bed a load of cactus and succulent plants in for the summer. Obviously not now because it's freezing and horrible. And then it's got a rock garden, which is alpine plants and rockery plants with a collection of really interesting tiny bulbs on there as well. But definitely one of my favourite spots in the garden is the succulent house. This is Nick. Nick is our succulent house volunteer.
Hello.
The succulent house, as I said, is a collection of true cactuses, and then we've got other succulents. People's favourites are definitely some of the aeoniums. I went on a holiday to one of the Canary Islands and saw aeoniums growing as weeds in the roofs of people's houses. As we get buddlier in the UK, they've got aeoniums growing in the cracks of the crumbling mortar. So as a bit of an experiment, we took some cuttings and fed them into the crumbling brickwork of the succulent house. And they've been growing happily there for probably about 3 or 4 years now. Even some of them flowering away. So it's been a big success for us. And they don't have any mix. There's no compost in there. They're literally growing in the mortar of the brickwork, and they're happier than the plants in the pots. So, as I say, the two flower beds here are the flower beds where we will bed out lots of the aeoniums and cactuses that we grow in there. We plant them in the ground here and create a really bonkers display of succulent plants, which look interesting, but definitely out of place in a Yorkshire garden, but it works and it's good. And on this side, we've got the rockery. And the last garden that we come to is the hot garden. And at the moment, it's not feeling very hot. So the hot garden consists of hot colours, basically. It's one of the sunniest spots in the garden, just from aspect wise, but we plant it up with reds and yellows and oranges, and so it's got a really hot, lovely feel to the garden. The most rewarding thing for me is when we get the public in and they are so happy and like the garden, basically. So I think people's reactions to this small garden is my favourite bit. One of the main ways to support Perennial that would help us out at York Gate, as well as helping Perennial, is to become a member of Perennial, and in that way you get a year-round membership, and you get to visit all of Perennial's gardens throughout the country, basically. And obviously you get to come to York Gate once a week if you want to.